In the topics of the history of economic thoughts, in this series, we have discussed Pythagoras, Plato, Xenophon, Democritus. All of these philosophers gave their own economic thoughts, their political thoughts, their ethics, their logics. Now we come across another philosopher whom is extremely influential in the earlier Greeks. In the ancient Greeks, the philosopher name is Aristotle. Aristotle was a person who gave the economic concepts such as private property. At that time, Plato gave the concept of the ideal state system, that is the communal property rights system. But Aristotle gave the concept of private property. Then further on, Aristotle also gave the concept of exchange and value, that how exchange and value is possible, how exchange and value should be determined. Then further on, Aristotle also have somewhat more foundations for the Austrian school of thoughts. Aristotle also shunned the money and also said that accumulation of heavy amount of money is not a good thing. The further on Aristotle, if we see after Aristotle, it was a drastic collapse in the era. In that era, there was no economic thoughts, neither there was political thoughts. Ethics and logic also deteriorated in that stage. Aristotle gave the concept of money. He said that money, the excessive accumulation of money, is really bad for an economy, for a person. Now, how it's bad for a person? Because money, if we have high accumulation of money, so it won't make us virtuous. He said that the accumulation of money should be at that at that level where we have virtuous and we can virtue. Now the accumulation of money would be on the basis of virtue. He also said that a certain amount of money can be desired, but not that a heavy accumulation of money that makes people greedy, that makes people that can do anything immoral. He also said that money generates money. That's also unjust. We will also further on discuss this thing. He also gave the concept that is mainly the concept of interest rate, and he also said that the concept of interest rate and the interest rate, when people give interest or money on interest, or people take money on interest, it's also unjust because of the money generates money, so it's really unjust. So we will also further dive in these concepts as well. Now if we see that why he said that private property is really good, he mainly gave five justifications. The first justification, he said that due to private property there is a large amount of production and it's in the self-interest of the people because it's according to human nature. Whereas if we see in the Plato ideal state system or the communal property right, the second justification he gave is that in the communal right, when most of the people they don't work, whereas some people really work hard. Now the people whom work hard and they get less amount of things while or equal amount of things like those whom don't work, so they just it just create jealousy in them, and it just create jealousy in them, and the society equilibrium it's disturbed really. Then further on, he also said that the it's a natural instinct to be private, to have private property. Now what's the natural instinct is that the people love self possessions, people love that things should be in their control, they should have their the right on things, and then they care for these things. Because as we see the tragedy of the commons, now tragedy of the commons arises because of the communal property right. Now if we have property rights, so then that's a case that it's natural instinct, and it's like there would be self possession, so no one would just deteriorate those things, they would care for these things. He also gives some of the historical evidences and also the moral virtue. He said that the historical evidence is that if we see in the past from quite long time ago, it's always there, it's everywhere. Now the communal property right, we are just changing the natural equilibria of the lifestyle, because the natural equilibria is to live in the private property, everybody should have their own private property. And the other is the moral justification. Now the moral justification here said that if people have private property, they have their own property, so they can act according to benevolence, they can do benevolence with other people, they can also become philanthropists, they can help with the poor because they would have their own private property. Aristotle also said something about money and interest rate. He said that money, it's just the facilitator of exchange, like it's a medium of exchange, you can do exchange from this. Now if if exchange is possible through money, so it means that if we generate money on money, that is interest rate, so that's really unjust because money itself is barren. It's like the something that just facilitate you in exchanges. So how can, when the money rests in someone's pocket, it just increases with time due to interest rate. But further on, if we see nowadays the topic of interest rate or the interest rate, it's because of the time value of money. So also many thinkers also question the Aristotle thoughts that if you know that why people just pay these interest rates, so you would know that why it's not unjust. So that's somehow the concept that Aristotle said, and Aristotle was really confused about the concept of money and interest rate, because at one side he said that private property is important, but in the other side he said that you shouldn't have the high accumulation of wealth, because through high accumulation of wealth you don't believe virtuous. So that was something contradictory in the Aristotle thoughts. Aristotle, if we see critically, so Aristotle have some of the contradictions in his thought, especially in the exchange concept or in the concept of money, in the concept of interest rate, because you need to arise questions. And if you arise these questions that why an exchange is unjust if it's not equally reciprocated, so then you would know that why the exchange is just thing, or why people do unjust exchanges. If you arise a question that why interest rate is not unjust, so then you would know that why people pay interest rate, why they just use the time value of money, and why people should accumulate wealth. If you accumulate wealth, so one of the things that arises is that you can work philanthropist, so the moral virtues arises here. So that was something that Aristotle really have contradictions in these kind of thoughts. Now, if we discuss the Aristotle concept of exchange, so the Aristotle concept of exchange was that how two peoples would exchange. He said that the values must reciprocate with each other. Like if one person exchange with another person, so the both people's goods would have equal value, or their values must reciprocate. Now, how this thing occurs? Mainly, if we see Aristotle later on, mainly just evidentially proven it by the Pythagorean mathematics. Now, he was really influenced by the Pythagorean mathematics, and he said, gave one classic example in his book of ethics. He said that a shoemaker and a builder example, that a builder gives a building to a shoemaker. Now the shoemaker must give a ratio of shoes that must equate the builder. Now how is possible that shoes must be given to a builder? So it was somewhat not a classic example, or not something that is really like appealing concept. Later on, the Austrian economists, they just correct those kind of things, and they said that equality, it's mainly in case of values. That in case of values is that the subjective value. If a person, like if you say a classic example of a $10 and a newspaper. Now if a person exchanges $10 in terms of newspaper, so it means that he have more value of newspaper rather than $10. Now this was something that Austrian economist corrected, that he said that Aristotle was like having this concept that people must act according to their subjective value. Aristotle also gave the concept that money have just diminished or eliminated many of the things, such as the double coincidence. This was something that is really like appealing concept, because double coincidence is something that if two people want the same thing, so then how it would be possible in exchange? Now it would be possible only if we give money in exchange of this thing. Now if two persons want the same thing, so they would buy those things by money, in exchange of money. So it was such that Aristotle was really amazed by the money. Now, it's also that gave the concept of diminishing margin utility. Aristotle was also somewhat the pioneer person in that diminishing margin utility concept that was later also used by the Austrian economist. He said that if gold is rare, so that's why it is of more value. Rather, it's less valuable than iron, but still it's more valuable. It's because of the scarcity. If a thing is less, so it means it would be more valuable rather than a thing if that is in abundance. So that was that was a concept that was given by Aristotle as well. Aristotle also gave the concept of marginal productivity insights. That is that the complementarity in production. That is, if saw is more valuable in like carpentry, so if the saw is more valuable in carpentry, so it means that saw is have more value than any other thing in carpentry. But he also gave the concept that if another complementarity which is really valuable in all other things, so that would be more valuable than everything. So this was something, a concept that was given by by Aristotle. He also gave the concept that now how you can have value and how you can determine value. It's like if there are two goods, one is A and another is B, and if A is just more valuable because of the addition of C rather than by the addition of B, so it means that C is more valuable than B. Now, this was a concept of addition that was given by Aristotle. Now, if we see, Aristotle have given such some concepts, that is the complementarity of goods, that is subjective value theory, that is marginal utility theory. He also gave the concept of private property instead of the heavily influenced philosopher that was his teacher as well, Plato, the communal property right. So he gave the concept of private property. He also gave the concept of money, that how money by money is unjust, or the concept of interest rate is unjust. So this was something that Aristotle was really famous for. Now, how collapse occurred after Aristotle? After Aristotle, the economic thoughts were really in drought. If we see in the Hellenistic or the Roman periods, there was no such economic thoughts or political thoughts like as in the time of the Greek polis like Plato, Aristotle, or somewhat the early Greek philosophers. And at that time, after Aristotle, the Greek polis were also disintegrated by the attack from the Alexander the Great and from the Romans. So more of the political thoughts and the economic thoughts were disintegrated because of the Greek polis disintegration. Now, if we go further on, so there were other school of thoughts, like the one school of thought is Epicurean. They also said that shun wealth and the self-denials. There was also a school of thought that is Cynics. Cynics were like from the Diogenes, and Diogenes was also living in poverty, and they said that you must have like the poverty. You don't have to go for the greeds, and don't go for the self-interest, and don't just run towards the money. Now, Diogenes were also really like attuned to this poverty kind of things. Now, the Epicureans and the Cynics, they just don't give the concepts, like don't give the economic concepts. They mainly give the concepts of the self-denial and of the poverties. Now, this was something that have stood the economy and the economic growths, and they don't give the concepts like how to build the polis and how you can have the high living of standard through economy. Later on, if we see in the Diogenes also said that Proteus have just like he have fired the gods, or he have fired the humans. But Proteus said that Diogenes have betrayed gods, and that's why Diogenes is living in barrel. So Diogenes was a person highly influential at that time because of his self-denial and because of the poverty. There is a very important story of Alexander and the Diogenes, that Alexander once visited Diogenes, and Diogenes said that please be aside and let the sun just come towards me. Now, that was a kind of person Diogenes was about the self-denial. Then another school of thought that came was the Stoicism. Stoicism school of thought, there were certain philosophers like Zeno, like Chrysippus. Now, how the Stoicism was? Stoicism was mainly about natural laws. At that time, there was no Greek polis. So at the time of Greek polis, if we see, many of the economic thoughts and the political thoughts were mainly centered toward the Greek polis. But according to the Stoics, they said that there must be natural law, there must be a shift from ethics and the moral laws, and these all must be universal, because they said that we must change with nature. How the nature acts, the human must act like that. And this was something that we should act in the politics and act in the economy as well, because everything is according to nature, and if we work according to nature, if we design our moral, our ethics according to nature, so we would have a good life. Then in that time there comes Cicero. Cicero was a person that said that we should work from the divine rights, or he said that everything should be determined from God and the divine sources. He said that our economy, our political structure, all of the things must be determined from God rights. These were some of the small political thought, economic or political thoughts, or somehow no thoughts you can say that come from this time, because after the collapse of Aristotle, no such vibrant thoughts can be seen. There is also that Cicero was really said that the politicians or the political leaders or the like the monarchs, they are not good people. That's why he just have a parable, and he said the parable is really about the Alexander and the pirates. That once a pirate came to Alexander and said to Alexander that the thing you are doing in the large scale, I am doing those in the small scale. So that's the thing, that you are deteriorating people in the larger scale, whereas I am just deteriorating people in the smaller scale. If we see after the collapse of Aristotle, no such vibrant thoughts can be seen till the Romans or till the later stages. If you see, Romans have done something good. They gave the laws. They also gave the private property laws, and the private property laws, applicable private property laws. They also give the contractual laws. Contractual laws was mainly that if a person uses a land or uses a thing, so they must have transfer of rights. Transfer of rights is necessary. They also gave the concept of merchant laws. Merchant laws was mainly for the merchants or for the trades, for the commerce. So they also developed it. Now if we see the Roman laws are also somewhat, they also influence the later laws, that is English common law, European civil law, and legal thinkings of other people. Now if you see, Aristotle also have many contradictions in his school of thoughts, but we can see that there is no other school of thought that have so much valuable economic insights. The economic insights they have developed later school of thoughts. Aristotle was the only person that have, or the other philosophers too in the ancient Greeks, that have developed the classical or the libertarian or the Austrian school of thoughts. But till if we see later on, there is no such economic thoughts, there is no such political thoughts till scholastics and till enlightenment.